And being it's a big week in the NBA, let's talk Rockets with Zack Tawatari, Luis Ortiz, and Jackson Gatlin, host of Locked On Rockets. Jackson, are you like carb loading to prepare for Thursday's trade deadline?
I tell you what, Jason, I'm carb loading the same way Michael Scott was carb loading in The Office, okay? So hopefully it has a different result at the end of the day. But yeah, we are almost there, almost to what is, I guess, the finish line of this little marathon here in the middle of the season.
Without a doubt. And you speak of the middle of the season. We're 47 games in, and let's talk about the Rockets' big picture. Has this team overachieved, underachieved, or is it status quo? And Luis, you'll be helping Jackson, and over on the big board, there it is. So overachieve, underachieve, or status quo, Jackson?
I think at this point, you have to look at this team as having underachieved to this point in the season. Now, some of that is out of their control, right? Fred VanVleet lost before the season even began, and then you've dealt with so many different injuries throughout the course of this campaign, missing a DFS until Christmas Day, Tari Eason in and out of the lineup, now no Steven Adams for the rest of the year after his season-ending ankle surgery. So I think that some of those variables you can't really control, right? Injuries are a part of the game, a part of every season. But outside of that, this team just hasn't really been able to gel or coalesce the way that we maybe thought they would coming into the year. And obviously losing Fred VanVleet, a guy that projected to be a really big part of this team, losing your primary ball handler, your floor general, the extension of the coaching staff on the court has certainly set this team back a little bit. But right now they're on pace to finish 52-30, which is the exact same record they had last year. And for a team that added Kevin Durant to its roster, you would have expected more than I think we've seen at this point in the season, even accounting for all the injuries and all the adversity that they faced so far.
Luis?
No, I agree. Underachieved, no doubt about it. I mean, after the expectations that are set with acquiring Kevin Durant, yeah, right now this team is underachieving. And yes, you have to take into account the missing part of Fred VanVleet, right? His injuries. So that's a big piece. This team, it shows you every night that they're missing that point guard to be the floor general. But also, I think there's a little bit of that grit that's missing. Maybe the Dylan Brooks factor, the effect, where this team is not playing with the same energy. You hear Ime Udoka say it sometimes after the game when they lose to some teams that they're supposed to beat. This team is definitely underachieving for now.
Yeah, I'm also going to have to agree with both of you guys and say underachieving, although I do think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Fred VanVleet hasn't been there to, like these guys said, be the floor general. I think they're lacking cohesion offensively especially, and I think a lot of that is attributable to that.
All right, so now we have 1, 2, 3, underachieve, and we will make it a clean sweep, especially when you consider you bring in Kevin Durant, you get rid of Jalen Green, expectations were so high, so I'm going to say underachieve as well. I also like what Luis was saying. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, underachieve about the Rockets 47 games in. And now let's talk trade deadline. Let's tackle this huge day coming up for the NBA. Jackson, what's on your shopping list for these Rockets right now? I assume point guard, or are we going somewhere else?
You know, it's tough, Jason, because you look at this team and you see that they have holes in the roster this season. Obviously, a very Fred VanVleet-sized hole, unfortunately, so far for this entire year. And you would have hoped that by this point in the season, you would have seen maybe a little bit more growth from guys like Amin Thompson and Reed Shepherd, able to kind of take the reins and take charge of that missing piece of the puzzle. And while there have been some impressive flashes and certainly some things to be excited for moving forward with those two guys, you still see on a night-to-night basis, right? This Rockets team is desperately missing a floor general out there. But there's just certain limitations with where this team is at with their actual available tradable salary and the pieces that they could try to move to improve the roster this season. And it's a very delicate balance between trying to trade a player that is maybe unable to make an impact this season, like a Steven Adams type who is now out for the rest of the season. He's making about $13 million. You could trade that salary and bring back an impact contributor, but is it worth losing the future impact of Steven Adams, right? If you can get Steven Adams back next season, healthy, ready to go, alongside a healthy, ready to go Fred VanVleet, are you punting on next year's chances or reducing your chances for next year to give yourself a slightly better shot this year? That being said, I would be looking at some type of a dynamic guard, not necessarily just a point guard type, not a guy like a Tyus Jones or a Jose Alvarado, somebody who can only play that point guard position on the floor. Because if the Rockets do make any kind of move at this deadline, it needs to be a move that doesn't just help them for this season, but is a move that can carry forward and a piece that you think can fit into the team construct next year and the year after that, as they're trying to build a sustainable contender with these years that Kevin Durant has left.
I agree that the point guard position is the vital one, right? Because you need that floor general. You need somebody to come in and lead the pack, because let's be real, Reshaped is a shooter. He's a shooting guard. He's not a point guard. You know, that's what it is. Amen Thompson is a scoring guard, maybe hybrid shooting guard, small forward, if you will. But also, I feel like these two guys don't have that playmaking ability to really see the floor that way, to create plays for other guys and make it just easier, the game easier for everybody else. So you need that point guard to fill in. And also, I mean, you talk about Steven Adams. I do think that if you talk about, okay, when he comes back next season and if he's healthy, along with Fred VanVleet, I think the risk of an injury happening is there every year, every season. So if the Rockets, I agree that they don't punt it now for next season. They got to go in and try to make this team better now and go for it this year. But I'm not opposed to trading Steven Adams, because he could get injured next year again.
Listen, with Kevin Durant, there is no such thing as punting. Not at Kevin Durant at this age. I would like to see just someone, maybe not a Dylan Brooks type, but someone who brings some juice, because how many times have we seen this team just collapse like in a fourth quarter or something like that? I just want to see someone who's going to bring some more juice to the floor and really get this team charged defensively and then help out offensively as well. But doesn't have to be a star, just someone that can really start to stir the drink a little bit.
Yeah, outside of the point guard position, which is the obvious need, and you could see it in their lack of cohesion offensively, I think. They really do need that presence to be able to dictate what's going to happen. And to your point, Luis, you know, the playmaking ability, but also it is that physicality that they're missing. We see them fall flat sometimes, and I think that a punch of energy would come in with someone who's got a little more physicality. Obviously,
Giannis is out there, Jackson. Does he really fit? And I would imagine the Bucks would want somebody like Şengün. To me, Alpe's off limits. So what would you definitely need another team to come and help. Does Giannis do anything for you on this roster?
If you had asked me a year ago about the Rockets potentially pursuing Giannis with a roster that kind of looked like this, I might be more inclined to say, yeah, they should absolutely go for it. But, you know, I think that first off, any and all trades involving a Giannis, at least at this deadline, would have to include Alperen Şengün, just from a salary matching perspective, like standpoint. The Rockets do not have enough tradable salary to go get Giannis without including Alperen Şengün, unfortunately. So that becomes the cornerstone of the deal. And I think on paper, right, Giannis is still a top 5, arguably top 3 player in the NBA, depending on who you ask, and is very much still in the prime of his career. But he's also a guy that's dealt with, you know, a handful of injuries in recent years. He's on the back slope of his career, now 31 years old. And I think that this Rockets team, the messaging, right, that they've kind of sent out and their kind of philosophy at this point is building a sustainable contender, a team that can be competitive for not just a brief 2 or 3 year window where then you have to hit another, you know, rebuilding phase and build something from the ground up once again, but something that has a chance to be competitive year in, year out, and give you title chances every year for the next 8 to 10 years. And when you have a guy like Alperen Şengün, who, albeit isn't quite as good as Giannis, very few people are, I think that this year in particular, when you look at especially how the season started for Alperen Şengün before his injury, he was playing at an all-NBA caliber level. He was playing at a top 15, top 10 player in the NBA type level. And the delta between where he was at and where we saw him play, not a hypothetical, not maybe he gets to be that good one day, but where we actually saw him playing at, the delta between how good he was and how good Giannis is right now isn't as much of a gap as it would need to be for me to heavily consider, yeah, the Rockets should look at trading Şengün for Giannis. I think maybe if Giannis stays in Milwaukee and doesn't get dealt at the deadline, maybe it's something that they revisit this upcoming offseason, similar to how they revisited the calculus this past season where there were rumors about maybe making the Kevin Durant trade at the deadline. They ultimately decided not to pull the trigger. They got through that playoff series against the Warriors, and they decided, you know what? Kevin Durant's the piece we want. Let's go get him. Maybe they revisit it this offseason, but I don't think a Giannis trade makes sense at the deadline for that and a handful of other reasons.
And if the Rockets don't make a deal, is this team as constructed good enough to win a title? Let's start with Luis and Zach on this. If no trade is made, is this team good enough right now to win?
No, you're seeing it. Right now, they are losing to teams like the Sacramento Kings. They're really struggling. Even the Dallas Mavericks, who don't have a Kyrie Irving, Anthony Davis is in and out of that lineup. So you can see in certain games that the Rockets are struggling, again, against teams that they're supposed to beat. I know that any given night, right, anybody can win, but there's some of these teams that you always favor the Rockets, and they're just not coming through. So I think the way that it's constructed right now, and you're missing that physicality, that grit that we've talked about, and also that floor general, it doesn't seem like it. But I also don't think that going for Giannis is the answer. I would not trade the future for Giannis, who, again, like Jackson said, is on the backslope of his career, and also a guy that I think for me it's more about athleticism rather than skill. It's not a guy that has like a dead-on jumper.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't think they're good enough to win a title right now for all the reasons that Luis said, but especially because they don't have that point guard, true point guard right now, right? Reed Sheppard is a shooter. That's what he is. That's probably what he's going to be. I don't see him handling the ball to the level that he would need to be a really good point guard. And like you said, Amen Thompson, incredible, dynamic player, but he's not the guy that's going to be bringing the ball up the floor every single time. I think without that, the Rockets are a really good collection of individual players with a really great coach, and that's why you don't trade the future, because you know how bright it's going to be.
Certainly it is a long season, 82 games, and there are going to be games that you lose that you shouldn't lose, but it just seems like the Rockets put themselves in a position where they are not beating a lot of the teams that they should beat. And championship teams do that. And I'm not saying this isn't a good team, but it just seems like when the Rockets really need to go for the jugular for whatever reason, they can't do it. So, Jackson, I give you the last word on this. This team, as constructed right now, is it good enough to win a title?
Clean sweep again, Jason. They're not, unfortunately. And it's, disappointing to have to say that. Again, we've, discussed some of the adversity that this team has faced and, the injuries that have mounted up this season. So there are things that have been kind of stacked against this team this year, unfortunately. But I will say, with the caveat that while I don't think that they are capable of winning a championship as presently constructed this season, I say that just with the caveat of this is a team that has Kevin Durant still playing at an all-NBA caliber level, a top 10 level. They've got Alperen Şengün, when healthy, who plays like a top 15 player in the NBA. They've got very talented role players. They have the pieces there, even with the injuries to Fred VanVleet and Steven Adams. And I will say, right, the messaging from the Rockets and the messaging from Fred VanVleet himself has been clear as day. Nobody internally, even Fred himself, has been calling it a season-ending injury, because there is that sliver of hope that Fred might be able to make it back for some type of a postseason push. And if Fred is able to make it back somewhere at the end of March, early April, getting his legs under him, even if it's just in a reduced capacity role of 15 to 20 minutes a night, think about some of these utter just catastrophic collapses this Rockets team has had this season. Some of the big leads, double-digit leads late in the fourth quarter where they've just let go of the rope, or where they haven't been able to get in and out of their offense effectively because they're missing that floor general. If you can get even 15 or 20 minutes a night of Fred VanVleet at 75% of what he was last year, that would be such a benefit to this Rockets squad. And that might be the piece that is able to take them over the edge a little bit and get them back into that at least puncher's chance of a contender status, because we've seen them go toe-to-toe with the Thunder, with the Nuggets, with the Spurs, with the Pistons. They've beaten all of the best teams in the NBA this season. And so in a 7-game series, anything can happen, but when you have two individually talented players like Kevin Durant and Alperen Şengün, and potentially your floor general working tirelessly to make his way back for some type of a reappearance this season, anything is possible.
Quickly, what is your best guess on the trade deadline? Do the Rockets make any moves? Big move, little move, anything?
I'm going to go wet blanket and say no moves, unfortunately, at the deadline.
Does that bother you guys?
Yeah, for sure.
It doesn't bother me. I mean, look, I think you hate to say, oh, they are really playing for next season, but any of the moves that they would make could end up implicating, one of their bigger players, and I just don't think it's worth it.
I think for me, you have a guy like Tari Eason that's, I think, movable, probably the most movable, if you will, and not in terms of salaries, but maybe talent that you're willing to part ways with. But if we're sitting here and saying that this team is not constructed to win a championship right now the way it is today, then of course we should be bothered by them not making a move, because then you're saying, well, then you should be making a move for it. But also, to Jackson's point, what he was saying about Kevin Durant playing at a, all-star and all-NBA caliber level, yeah, he is. But, man, at his age, you can't be depending on, and Ime has already said this, you can't depend on him to be playing 39 minutes a game and also be the guy that just start. And Charles Barkley said it the other night, Saturday, after the Mavericks game, you can't depend on him to be your starter. He should be your finisher. KD was brought because Jalen Green could not finish games. That's what he was brought for. Not that he can't be your leading scorer, but he shouldn't be the guy that has to ignite your offense because no one else can put points up, because now they're still daring Amen Thompson to shoot when leaving him wide open because they know he's not a knockdown shooter.
It is fascinating stuff, Jackson. What is in front of the Rockets, near term and long term? I'm sure you will have complete coverage of whatever happens during the trade deadline on Locked On Rockets, correct?
Of course, we'll have a trade deadline preview out with lots of in-depth thoughts and then instant reaction after the trade deadline concludes.
Jackson Gatlin, thanks for being on Sports Extra.
Always a pleasure.